Greetings and salutations, fellow geeks and nerds. This is not a drill. No, this is not a hallucination. This is the Geeks Journal. I'm Gareth. We're back. I know it's been a long time since I've actually been with you, and I've been around, and I can only apologise. Things have been quite crazy over the last year and a half. The major impact on news that I thought I would share with you is that I had a baby back in February last year. As the grey hair, baggy eyes and soggy middle will attest to, my wife gave birth to our son back last February, so I've been rather preoccupied. As a parent, there are so many questions that you want to ask yourself, and a lot of factors that you have to consider, and it got me thinking that probably one of the most important questions for me is, what sort of classic TV shows and cartoons I want to show your kid when they get a little older. Because, let's be honest, I don't quite understand how it is that problem child Norman Price has not been sent to some sort of boarding school or military academy just so that Fireman Sam can have a day off without a fear that Pontypandy is going to go up in flames. And let's face it, Peppa Pig is just a spoilt brat that should have become a bacon sandwich a long, long time ago. But still, there are so many great classic cartoons that have been out there over the last 30 plus years, and I think they don't get enough recognition. I think they deserve to be seen after all this time, and they are way better than the vast majority of shows that exist and that are churned out into the ether these days. So I thought, why not take this opportunity to come back to the fold and bring a special to pay homage to those shows, which for myself, and I imagine many of you, enjoyed while we were growing up, and I'd actually really like to show my son one day. So let's make a start. In no particular order, other than the last one. The last one is my top favourite one. But these are just my personal favourites. That's right, first up is the Thundercats. Now, other than the raccoons... Wait, actually no, do you know what? Can we just take a moment just to really appreciate how good that theme tune actually was?
You can run with us. We've got everything you need. Run with us. We are free.
Okay, so other than the raccoons, Thundercats was probably like my earliest memory of watching a cartoon. And my parents had bought me a VHS copy of Exodus, which was it was the first 4 episodes, but they put it together in like a feature-length equivalent. It ran for about 75 minutes. It just captured my imagination. Now, some of you may not be familiar. That's okay. We'll just take a minute to kind of revisit. So they're a race called the Thunderians, from the planet Thundera. Granted, not much of a strain on the brain cells. The planet is on the verge of collapse. Think along the lines of Krypton, Superman. And the Thundercats are fleeing to find a new home. After waking from stasis decades later, they land on a planet they refer to as Third Earth. Now, refugeed from their home planet, they must build a new home, led by the Lord of the Thundercats, Lion-O, with his trusty weapon, the Sword of Omens, where they regularly battle with the forces of evil, which more often than not are led by the evil Mumra. Now, there was a brief resurgence for one season in 2011, with a slightly different take on the lore of the franchise, as well as comic runs from Wildstorm Comics in the early 2000s, but it's never really landed. DC also brought their own take on it with a crossover with He-Man, Masters of the Universe. Again, it's entertaining, but as a franchise, the brand seems to lack the longevity these days. For me personally, I think this is very much a nostalgia factor. It would be interesting to see what a younger audience makes of it. Considering the latest version that they're trying to do, called Thundercats Raw, well, it's It's, well, needless to say, they've clearly gone off the beaten track with this one. Yeah, time will tell. Rugrats. Quite simply, the blueprint for all achievable mischief of a small baby capable of movement, which, currently looking after a 1-year-old, I can very much appreciate. Where little Tommy Pickles and his band of friends getting into all sorts of adventures unbeknownst to their blissfully ignorant parents. Now, this has to be... I think for me this has to be like one of the all-time classic shows as far as children's animation goes. Not only funny for all ages, but went to some really dark comedic places for the adults. For example, Tommy's best friend Chucky, his parents are trying to potty train him. And during the animation, he has a nightmare where using the toilet is treated like being sentenced to the electric chair. It's crazy. It is a scene that is so dark, I cannot find a clip of it to show you. So, I'm afraid you're going to have to settle for this to give you some indication. But what I can say, the episode is available, I believe it's on Amazon Prime. Check it out. It's I think it's Season 2, Episode 3, Chucky versus the Potty. Very funny. Please check it out.
A baby's gotta do what a baby's gotta do.
So getting back to the light-hearted side of this show, thinking about it, and I can't be the only one thinking this, but am I the only one that feels that Tommy could potentially be a Time Lord? Think about it. Maybe the Doctor himself in a different incarnation. Come on. Travelling around, getting into all sorts of mischief. Small group of friends. Carries a trusty screwdriver. Lest we forget the army of Daleks that Chucky walks past in a previous episode. That's right, everyone's favourite band of mutants. Growing up, I loved this show. As far as Marvel goes, it was probably my introduction into their universe. Other than the Spider-Man animation, which we'll get to later. An introduction which led to collecting trading cards with my friends in school, which I actually still have to this day. Collecting Wolverine comics, anything to gain a better understanding of this wonderful story of inclusion, family, of the attempts of overcoming oppression and adversity while fighting giant-ass robots. So then we come to Spider-Man. Now, Spider-Man was also produced between Marvel and Fox in the early mid-90s. We witnessed probably some of the most accurate depictions of characters in the Spidey canon that we'd ever seen. And after its 5-season run, it even ended in a reasonably satisfactory conclusion, which today, like, given the amount of nerd rage out there at the moment, it's unheard of. I mean, no spoilers, though. I think, it's the sort of thing that you should actually come to your own conclusion about. But of course, after that, the rest is history. Marvel sold the rights for Spider-Man to Sony in 1999, and leading to some very questionable choices. But also led to some amazing ones. They worked in association with Marvel rather than drilling the franchise into the ground.
Like, what's up, danger? Like, what's up, danger?
Plus, luckily, we get one more installment between the two production companies before Sony has to take the training wheels off and make Spider movies on their own. The benefit of this, however, is that we may actually get to see Tom Holland's Peter Parker and Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock on screen together. Spider-Man and Venom. Oh, come on. Admit it, you would watch the crap out of that film.
Why would we do that?
The thing that's interesting about both of these shows is that Fox are crossing over these characters along with other shows like The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man, Fantastic Four, Silver Surfer, like long before Marvel even dreamt up the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it really worked. To be honest, it was pretty awesome. The downside is that for a lot of these titles, home releases of these are gold dust, truly. You cannot get them for love nor money. They've become so rare over the years, they're impossible to get hold of them without selling any internal organs. But, as luck would have it, in recent months, Marvel and Disney have snapped their globally dominant Infinity Gauntlet and have brought the original animated titles, full seasons, to their new streaming service Disney+. And I, for one, am over the moon and have been rewatching them quite intently.
Transformers.
Next up, we have the Transformers. Everyone's favourite robots in disguise. Now, to clarify, I mean the classic cartoon series that ran from 1984. I do not mean the Michael Bay minefield that continues to make fans angry to this day at an alarming rate. Just a mess. For those of you not familiar with the overall story, in a period of civil war, you have the Autobots led by Optimus Prime. You have the Decepticons ruled by Megatron. They battle on their home planet of Cybertron, a war that eventually spills across the galaxy to planet Earth, where they hide among us in plain sight as common vehicles, weapons, and other miscellaneous items. Now, as tended to be the case with cartoon shows in the 80s, they were quite formulaic. You know, the struggle between good and evil, battling together and evil coming up short. But overall, it was just fun. It was great. But in 1987, along comes the movie. It's a game changer. Truly, it's brilliant. Not only do they finally make it to the big screen with an amazing soundtrack, but they shock all the fans and kill a substantial number of original favourites from the day one lineup in the first 20 minutes. And they do so as a way to introduce new characters and make way for a brand new toy line. So, as a business decision, it's really sound, truly inspiring. But as a 5-year-old watching it, I have to tell you, it was some scary and traumatizing shit. I mean, that on one side, but I mean, not to mention, spoiler ahead if you've not seen this. Right! If you never found that emotional, you are made of more metal than the Transformers themselves. I mean, this animated classic gave, and still gives, more of an emotional response than the entire Michael Bay franchise put together. I mean, I haven't even watched The Last Night yet, but I can guarantee I'm going to need to be drunk off my ass when I do, in order to get through even half of it, the entirety of the film. I don't know what state I'm going to be in.
I am directly below. Enemy scrotum.
Honestly, it just got sloppy so much. I mean, at one point I watched Age of Extinction and the plot seemed to jump ahead so much I genuinely thought I blacked out. Still, it's done. You know, Travis Knight reasonably save the franchise with Bumblebee. I'm over it. I'm fine. I'm okay. Let's move on.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Heroes in a half shell. Turtle power.
I mean, okay. Does this one really need much of an introduction? 4 turtles get covered in radioactive mutagen, where they then grow up into walking, talking amphibians with an unhealthy appetite for pizza, who learn ninjutsu from their guardian Splinter, a talking rat. Whilst this sounds like a veterinarian's fever dream, this franchise has been ongoing for over 30 years, since Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird released their first issue with Mirage Comics back in 1984. It's always been present in some way, shape or form. The comics, the cartoons, the toys, the movies, the ninja rap? Okay, maybe not the ninja rap, but you get my point. For such a simple premise, these guys have stood the test of time. The original animated series ran from 1987 to 1996, with several versions since then, up to the present, including a live-action series which was very questionable in quality. And if I'm honest, the latest versions aren't that great either. Best version, in my humble opinion, the original, obviously. And then 2012 CGI series that was released on Nickelodeon. The pop culture references used in it are brilliant. At one point I was watching and then just all of a sudden realised that they were doing a whole episode that was essentially Big Trouble in Little China. My head genuinely exploded. It was phenomenal. Okay, now before we get into the cartoon at the top of my list, I wanted to give special mentions real quick because there's too many to talk about without taking up so much more of your precious time. Okay, here we go. Galaxy High, Star Wars, Droids and Ewoks, Tiny Toon Adventures, including Pinky and the Brain and the Animaniacs, Muppet Babies, Dungeons and Dragons, He-Man Master of the Universe, including She-Ra Princess of Power. Yes, that's right, I said it. Trapdoor, Bucky O'Hare, Visionaries, Centurions, Defenders of the Earth, The Real Ghostbusters, Danger Mouse, Count Duckula, The Raccoons, and The Dreamstone. Do you know what? Let's take another special mention and listen to the theme tune for that too. Now, last, but by no means least, my top pick. That's right. Batman the Animated Series. Now I know there's probably some people out there saying, but Gareth, you can't show your child a cartoon about a disturbed rich orphan beating people up wearing a mask. Doesn't send the right message. But the animated series of Batman was first shown in the UK on a Saturday morning kids TV show called What's Up Doll, which featured Warner Brothers cartoons exclusively such as Animaniacs, Tiny Toons, and Pinky and the Brain. Developed by Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski, I think I'm pronouncing that right, produced by Warner Brothers Animation, is quite simply the measuring stick for all comic book animation as far as I'm concerned. Concise, faithful to the source material, but it stands on its own merit, and most importantly, they were simply good stories. The series features the vocal talents of Kevin Conroy as the Caped Crusader and series regular Mark Hamill as the Joker. Hamill, who arguably is one of the most recognised castings in the show, only appeared in 15 of the 85 episodes. And a random fact is that Tim Curry was originally supposed to play the Joker. He was supposed to do the voice of the Joker. However, reasons behind him not continuing do differ. Curry has often said that he was actually developing bronchitis at the time, and so couldn't continue, whereas Warner Brothers said they simply didn't like his take, and so they wanted to go in a different direction, which is where they hired Mark Hamill. After over 25 years, these vocal legends are so firmly embedded in popular culture. And it shows. Truly. It shows that the fans still have plenty of room for them, judging by the amount of platforms they've been featured in during that time, not to mention the show itself. Mask of the Phantasm was a feature-length animated movie that originally was supposed to be released straight to video, but Warner Brothers decided it had to be released in cinemas. And I'll go as far as to say that it's one of the best productions that DC and Warner Brothers have ever made together, and I mean that from animated and live-action movies. These performers have proved so popular over the years in these roles, it brought them a resurgence, breaking into the gaming industry with the release of the trilogy from Rocksteady between 2009 and 2015, which was Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, and Arkham Knight, which if you've not played them before, get hold of them and check them out. They're truly brilliant and well worth the investment in money and time. Not to mention the animated movie adaptation of Alan Moore's The Killing Joke, which saw the return of Conroy and Hamill as the Dark Knight and the Clown Prince of Crime. But to be honest, whenever I read a Batman comic, it's Conroy's voice I hear. And the same goes for Hamill whenever I read any dialogue from the Joker. Hamill has just always had the right amount of chaos and eeriness that the role needs, and it's just stuck with me ever since he first appeared. Like, truly, truly brilliant.
Makes you want to laugh, doesn't it, Art?
The complete animated series was released in Blu-ray, restored back in 2018, and it's glorious. I cannot recommend it enough, and when my son is a little bit older, you can bet this is going to be top of my list to show him.
I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman.
I think I've bent your ears for long enough. It should probably be on my Mary, but thank you for taking the time to watch this special episode. I'm really glad to be back. Thank you for your patience. I'm sure I'm a little rusty in places production-wise than I used to be, but I'm going to be getting back up to speed very soon. In some very uncertain times currently, it's important that we find some enjoyment and have a little fun, and I really hope that that's something that we can do here. Normal news and coverage is going to be resuming shortly, including some special episodes I've got planned, kind of much along the same vein as this one. I can't wait to share them with you. I'm just really happy to be doing this again. Our social media is still alive, has continued to be going, and is currently making its presence known across your screen right now. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'm going to be back very soon. Until next time, from the Geeks Journal, end of line.